Everyone, I'm Emmaleen Muldoon and I'm here today with Dorothy Taylor, and we are going to look at the birth chart for Queen Elizabeth II. Now, what we hope to do today is give you an idea about how we both do readings and what we look at when we look at birth charts. We have the Queen's chart here that we're sharing Dorothy's sharing her screen with you, so you can see that the Queen's chart is up. And we're going to look at parts of it, just go through, look at her traits, her personality, and also maybe, if we have time, a couple of the big life transits that she's gone through. Obviously, she's gone through lots, but a couple of the earlier big ones maybe. Usually a reading with me or Dorothy would be an hour or 90 minutes. We do cover a lot of ground in our readings, but today we're going to try and just go through the big stuff, the big, the stuff that's more apparent. And thank you for sharing your screen with us, Dorothy.
You're welcome.
If we look at this chart, and we're going to assume that people that are listening to this video have a bit of a knowledge about astrology, and they're looking to go a bit deeper into studying, because I think looking at people who are in the public eye is a good way to learn about astrology, because you can see when transits come up and then look at their charts and see how it's being activated. So it's kind of a good way to learn when you are learning astrology, looking at someone like a celebrity or a politician or someone that you can get their birth time. So it's a good practice. But of course, with the royal family, there is a lot of their life that is private, even though we feel like we know them. We don't know all of them. They do have a private life. So going through a chart for someone like this is interesting, because I think I see stuff that you wouldn't necessarily realize about the Queen. And I think it's similar to when I read a friend's chart. If my friend says, "Can you look at my birth chart?" and I pull it up and I think, "Oh, I didn't realize that about them. I didn't see that about them." I don't know if you've had that experience, Dorothy.
Oh, I have. Yes.
So
to establish the Queen's chart, though, her birth chart is, I've cast it for her birth date of April 21st, 1926 on a Wednesday at 2:40 a.m. in London, United Kingdom. But yes, there are a lot of things about people that you don't necessarily see. Everyone has a private inner world. And for the Queen, that would be even more so, I would imagine.
Yeah, obviously there's the stuff that that we see about them because they have a public life, but obviously they still have their private life, and that's why it's interesting to look at charts of people like this, or like your friends, because then you say, "Oh, I didn't realize that about you." And one of the things that I was taught when I was learning astrology was, with someone who is in the public eye, look to the midheaven. Right up there at the top point, there's usually a planet around that point, and the Queen, she does have a planet there. So should we start by talking about her rising sign and the ruling planet, because that is her ruling planet?
Yes. So her ascendant is Capricorn, and it's at 2122 Capricorn, and the ruling planet for her chart is Saturn, because Saturn rules Capricorn. So everything that she presents or how she views life or perspective on life has to pass through her Saturn energy before it gets to the rest of her chart or the rest of her personality. Scorpio, go ahead.
Sorry. And having her her planet, her chart ruler right up there on the midheaven, that's what we see, because that's the point. The midheaven is what we see about a person. It's the reputation, it's the career. So we see that Saturn, we see her work ethic, we see her taking responsibility, we see her being traditional. And also Saturn is like the time lord, it's longevity. This is a lady who has been in the public eye for a long time, and probably will continue to have that reputation even after she's gone, because it's up there. Saturn keeps her going.
Yep, she'll be seen as one of the preeminent authority figures, I think, throughout history. And she also has very close to her ascendant, the South Node in Capricorn. So she's coming from a traditional standpoint. She's coming from a traditional view as well. So going forward, she is traditional, but also she has tradition behind her. The other thing I noticed about her chart when I looked at it, and I don't know, we didn't talk about this before we got on, but one of the things I want to point out is that the Queen has two interceptions. One is here in the first house, and that means that Aquarius here is intercepted, and we'll explain what that means in just a minute, but also Leo is intercepted. Her second set of interception is from Aries and Libra. So there are 4 signs intercepted in her chart. You want to give a definition of interceptions?
Yeah, so when you have a sign that's intercepted like that in a house, it's hidden away. You don't necessarily see that part of the person. You might have to dig a bit deeper, and that first interception within the first house is part of her. So maybe there's a part of her that we don't see as easily, or that she keeps hidden away.
And Aquarius, it represents groups. So the citizens of the UK would be represented by Aquarius here, and she does have a good number of planets here in Aquarius in that first house. So I think part of her persona, part of her identity going forward is that she does represent a group, although it's as if she doesn't actually have a say in that, or she doesn't express that as, but she feels a good amount of responsibility, or feels as if the group energy defines her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting though that Leo over here in the 1-to-1 house is also intercepted, and her moon is here, because again, that's another area over here in the 1-to-1 relationship house that her relationships, some of her relationships, or a part of her relationships with people, although she may be the center of attention, are also hidden. They're not out there being expressed in the open.
Yes, exactly. And her moon being there, so her closest emotional relationships, I think the feelings that she has for love and the intensity, maybe she keeps that, hidden away.
And Leos are very generous. They're very generous people, and especially with the moon being there, there's going to be this emotional generosity towards people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that people see the Queen that way, emotionally generous. But people may be seeing it now that she's got grandchildren and she's older, and she's still the center of attention, but she has this generosity about her that people don't necessarily see out in the public.
Mm-hmm.
The other 2 signs that are intercepted is Aries down here in the 2nd house and Libra in the 8th. And I'll let you talk about that dynamic.
Well, yeah, I think that the Aries in the second house is, obviously we think about income, but it's also our self-worth and how we value ourselves. So it's almost like she's pushing aside herself there, because Aries is putting yourself forward, putting yourself forward as a leader, and she's just taking that out. It's almost like I'm second to what I have to do.
Yet she does have the ability to act, yes, because of that Aries in the 2nd house as a personal resource. She can make decisions and act, sometimes maybe rashly, but in the public, she would not be seen as being someone who takes chances or is aggressive or very assertive, if that makes sense. Libra.
Yeah, so Libra is up there, and that's in her 8th house. So that's how other people maybe relate with her, because it's the 8th house. So that's Libra as well. So it's relationships with other people, with other people. So it's maybe she keeps that part again hidden, like just below the surface almost. So you'd have to really get to know her to know how she's relating with others.
Yeah, there is this innate balance and harmony, this desire to relate to other people,
Yeah.
in a very diplomatic way. She's very diplomatic. So those are the intercepted signs, and these are probably part of the secret parts of the queen that people may not have recognized before. And now we'll get to some of the more obvious experiences of the energy.
Well, I loved that you touched on the nodes a moment ago. You mentioned her south node in Capricorn. It's right on the ascendant there, as you guys can see. And also that means that the north node is right on the descendant. And we were talking about this a bit before we started, but well, the 12th house is our house of karma and finishing up lessons. So it's almost like with the nodes of fate and destiny hanging out there on the ascendant within the 12th house as well. She's being pushed in this lifetime to finish up, push forward, almost like a destined path that she's on to sort of finish up the lessons, work on the karma of maybe past generations or past lives. And almost sometimes you feel like you don't have the control where you're going because there's fated events that happen that pull you along the way. Like there's a life path there that's you're being guided along almost, that can come up. And then the north node being over there on the descendant can bring in very fated relationships. So the person that you relate with, and that would be Prince Philip, her husband, was meant to come in. He was meant to take her in a direction or be there with her on her side. So I really like that, because that to me seems very true, that they were worked really well together. They were a good pair and they really supported each other. So I think he was meant to be there with her.
So one of the things you notice when you look at the nodes is that the south node is sextile Saturn, and the north node is trine Saturn. And so that's very important in her chart, because Saturn acts as a lever or handle to between the north and south nodes. So that responsibility, that public position that she holds, really has an interesting, or the nodes have an interesting effect on Saturn, coming from the past, going to the future. This responsibility that she took on and wasn't historically acknowledged as supposed to have taken place, and she ends up queen when she was not in the line of succession under the normal circumstances. And so history played a part in her becoming queen. Those nodes are also it's in conjunct with Mars here. And the south node is at a quincox. So at some point there was an adjustment required for her to be able to reach this nodal axis and go from the past towards the future, or what she would have fallen back on, and moved towards what she would want to work towards.
Yeah, I love the nodes. They're so interesting to read in a chart. And also, if you think about it, it's kind of the reverse to what you would think the queen would have in her chart. If you thought, well, the queen would have a north node in Capricorn, because that's where she's moving towards. But if you look at this, her south node's in Capricorn. She knows how to be a leader. She knows how to be sort of responsible and the head of the institution. But what she's pulling towards is that nurturing love inside with her relationships. And that's, again, something that we don't necessarily think of the queen for. I think we all think about the south node Capricorn with the head of the institution and the responsibility. But what she's working towards in her life is really being caring with her relationships. Is on the descendant, motherly or nurturing with her relationship, but also just generally being there to help people, support people, make them feel like she's being maternal, like a mother figure that can come out with the North Node in Cancer. So I really like that, because in a way, I think that's how we view her now. Maybe not at the beginning of her reign, but now we're seeing her at the towards the end, where she's older and she's got her grandchildren and her great grandchildren. We're looking at her as almost like the mother of the country, the grandmother of the country. You know, she definitely has that Cancer North Node now.
One of the excuse me, one of the things I learned about Capricorns, so she's coming in with the Capricorn energy, and that's how her identity, she presents herself as a Capricorn. One of the things I learned about Capricorns in my studies was that Capricorn grows younger as it grows older. So it's almost as if life is very serious when a Capricorn is younger. They'll do things like read encyclopedias, and they're steadfast and study and learn all the things they're going to need to learn to be a leader. And then as they get older, they want to enjoy life more. And so she is presenting, it seems that I see her laughing more. I see her interacting in a way with even her grandkids and her great grandkids in a way that we had not seen in years past. So it seems that she is doing that same thing and growing towards that Capricorn energy of, wanting to feel that emotional connection to people. And of course, being queen, she needs to have that at home. She wants that at home and in her daily life. So she's working towards that. So the next thing I think it would be beneficial, we've talked about the Mars energy here. We've talked about Saturn here. And Pluto is making a couple of alignments to planets in her chart as well.
Yeah,
Now, Sun is in Taurus. We can't forget about that. Her Sun is in Taurus.
That's a big one.
At 0, so it's at the very beginning of the sign. And that kind of indicates that she's moving into the more Taurus centered energy. If you're talking about past lives or karma or that sort of thing, she's learning about Taurus energy, and that is about a stable environment, right? Now her father became king just before World War II, when his brother abdicated the throne. So that might have been a little disconcerting for a Taurus sun. They definitely like things to stay kind of normal, kind of status quo, don't change things. But she has some alignments that also indicate that she's very, very well attuned to transformation and change. I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the change and moving forward, being progressive, I think her Mars in Aquarius next to the Jupiter right there in the first house, that's to me, that's progressive. That's moving forwards where she needs to go. Seeing where the people are moving, seeing where the like technology is moving towards. She can keep up. She can go where she needs to go. But yes, that you're right. She has that the Taurus sun is that very stable, wanting to put down the roots, wanting to stay, wanting to stay put. Sometimes I think they're they're very happy when they're in the same house for a long period of time, and being the queen, she's had the same house almost all of her life. So I think that's probably quite comforting.
We've also seen her out with animals, and Taurus loves animals. It likes nature, all of these things. We've seen her out in nature. And
true.
Dog, she loves her dog. She loves animals. She loves to spend time with them. That also goes with this kind of Cancer nurturing thing. Animals are something she can nurture in private, and it's not going to be in the newspapers.
That's true.
But it is. We see her doing it.
I was just going to say, also within recent years, she started the Queen's Canopy project, where she's growing trees all around the world. Now that's, Taurus.
That's a very Taurus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that initiative.
Yeah, that is awesome that she has started that. It's a kind of Taurus is about nature and they like earthly type tangible things. And trees are certainly one of those things. But bringing back up the Mars and Jupiter in Aquarius here in the first house represents our identity. And even though this seems to be hidden here in the interception, she is a public, Aquarius represents public, a public figure.
Yeah.
Not only is she a public figure, but she is very well aware of what goes on in the public. And she makes choices based on what goes on in the public. Um, so
Sorry.
being a public figure, both here in her house of identity, where it's a personal identity, but also having Saturn up here on the 10th house cusp, which is her public identity, is certainly interesting in this chart. And they are at a square, and she feels emotionally drawn and emotionally connected to this position as if it is something she is supposed to do. She may not have been born knowing that, but she certainly knows that by now.
Yes, and also I think of Aquarius as being like a humanitarian sign as well. So it's like a drive to help the people, which I do think she comes across with that that drive. That's where her Mars is. That's where her focus is. That's where her energy goes towards, and wanting to help. And Jupiter's wanting to help with that, wanting to help make humanity better, almost. Having those two come together, that's how I'd read it in a birth chart. So, and also Jupiter's overseas. So the Queen has a lot of connection with countries all around the world. So there is that
Mhm.
Jupiter going further afield. Her mission doesn't just end at home; it goes further to other countries as well.
And that's, we're in the US and we're using her as an example in a chart. She's
Yeah.
definitely, and as far as being aware of humanitarian and human concerns, social concerns, she is known worldwide. She is a public figure worldwide. It exceeds the boundaries and limits of just her home. So when I say she's a public figure, I mean she is a whopper of a public figure, and that's what Jupiter does for her is expand that identity. Not only that, but the choices she makes, the things she does, do have far-reaching effects. And I love that she has her sun down here in the second house in this private area of the chart. Everything that happens below this line happens personally or inwardly for the person. And so she is actually keeping that close to her chest. She is a very, very private person. And so all of this is happening in a very private way for her.
Yeah, that does. Yeah. I think her moon being above the horizon, so sometimes her emotions are she has to show her emotions in public because the moon is, the emotional part of us as well. So there are times where obviously that's going to happen. Her emotions are out there for us to see. So I guess that's more the public family occasions, maybe where you can see that she's emotional. Like I've been thinking about Prince Philip's funeral and how the camera was there on her. I mean, it's not a nice thing to have, but it was there. We could all see the emotion.
And her emotions have been watched several times when Princess Diana, people thought she didn't have the right emotion. She didn't respond out in public correctly, right?
Yeah.
So her emotions have been an issue several times, and it is above the horizon. So it is in the public area of the chart. And so they're going to be noticed. And to think she is not showing emotion or not is just because she is so private, she's not letting you see them. It's not that she doesn't have them, which was kind of reported when Diana passed away. Um, and the fact that this sign is intercepted, she very much knows that she is in the limelight. She is being noticed.
Mhm.
And Leos are known to want attention. right? To
Yes.
be the center of attention. But with an intercepted sign like that, they're not so out in the open. They may be the center of the attention, but it's almost as if that's triggered by something else. They're not out there seeking it. Does that make sense?
That's a really good point. I like that. Yeah, that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that works. That works
Okay.
really well. Okay, so I love you're going to Venus now.
Yeah, we can go to Venus now.
Yeah, I just saw it's hovering on Venus. Venus, I think, is big in her chart because it's trining Pluto. So I mean, that was one of the first things when I pulled up her chart to look at her birth chart. I saw that one of the first things because
Yeah.
there's an intensity of emotions a lot of the time that can be like an overload or feelings of love or passion or things that you really love and emotional about sort of sometimes can be intense, and you wouldn't see that with the Queen, I don't think. So that was interesting to me. But the other thing I think with Pluto Venus is that you're serious about your relationships when you find one. You're serious about it, and I think that does play out. We do see that when she fell in love with Prince Philip, it was for life. She took that very seriously. She took her relationship seriously. So that I think you can see, but the other part wasn't so obvious to me when I was reading it.
Yeah. Powerful relationships would definitely come up here. And if you notice, they're part of her identity. That they actually give her identity a little more oomph. And especially with it being Pluto. Pluto is about power and control. And Pluto is offering that over there to Venus here in the first house as a part of her identity. So you get a glimpse of Pluto from her Venus here in Pisces. And Pisces is usually very passive.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these planets are in water signs. That's the reason for this trine here. And Cancer is nurturing. And so the two together mean that her emotions really are powerful, and her ability to nurture is very powerful in her relationships. How she perceives people or what she offers them is very important to them. They know that it's almost like being offered a blessing, if that makes sense. She has the ability to make people feel very deeply.
That's really good.
It is also at a quincunx to her moon. And Venus at a quincunx means there is some sort of adjustment required um, between the Leo and the Pisces energy. And quincunxes call for squares can be a creative solution. You could work out a creative solution. A quincunx is more intense. Not it rivals with the opposition, but a quincunx, there is no option. An adjustment is required. So in the Queen's case, here as part of her identity, she has this easygoing Pisces. Don't, wherever, whatever, everything is fine. But up here, she's the center of attention, and she has to play that role. And to do that, in order to do that, she actually has to step out of her Pisces feminine energy down there that says everything's good, whatever, right? She has to come up here and be the generous Leo that people pay attention to. And what it reminds me of is her standing on the balcony waving. She's got to go out there and wave. Although she'd rather be outside taking a hot bath or swimming or, anything that would be different than being out on that balcony waving.
Yeah.
Um, so um, I like the Moon Venus conjunction because the Moon and Venus, I'm sorry, quincunx, the Moon and Venus have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
They're both similar energies. And so this adjustment that's required is probably less traumatic than some other quincunxes could be, but it's still there. She would rather be behind the scenes. And here she is, a public figure who is the center of attention.
I think it could speak to her relationship with her mum as well, I suppose, because this, you know, the moon it can also be mum in a chart as well, traditionally. So that might.
You know what sign her mother was?
I don't. I haven't pulled up her mother's chart, but I was just thinking about that where you were talking about the moon. Or it could also be how she relates with her mum, or how she used to, and they were.
But also
Yeah.
thinking about her life and how she suddenly became in line for the throne. Her relationship with her mother changed. She became the inheritor of her father's throne.
Yeah.
And so there was definitely an adjustment that would have been required within that family, including with the mom. And when she became queen, she became more powerful than her mother in some sense. So, you know, that would take that would make an adjustment, you know, to have your mom curtsy to you. That would
Yeah,
be
that's true. It would
that would be a pretty big deal
that would
for
be.
someone emotionally, a young person emotionally. That would be a big deal. So that, you know, if you think about those sorts of adjustments, that's the kind of thing she's had to deal with all of her life. And well, at least since she was what, 6? No,
She found out she would be
10.
queen when she was 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since she was 10, she's had to make these adjustments where, you know, she would rather have these types of relationships that are easygoing and they're kind of in the background. Nobody, you know, it's my stuff. And then she's thrust out there in the public, and even relationships with her mother would change. So that is an interesting aspect of this chart.
Yeah, and that also comes into play with the transit for when she found out she would be queen, because there was the Saturn Venus conjunction going on. So that actually is exactly how you would read it, what you just said. So that's a really good point.
Okay, so we have read most of the major aspects in this chart.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead.
So I think we've done most of the big stuff that we can get through and not bore you all for like an hour and a half of what we would do if we were going through a full reading, obviously. One other thing that I just sort of looking at here before we move on maybe to the transit is Sun is next to Chiron. So you know, like when you look at a planet or a star that's next to the sun, it's more obvious. Sometimes it's shining down on that person. It can really it can hammer home on them a little bit because that's where you shine and that planet's there or that star is there. And that's the wounded healer. So there has been times where maybe she's had the pain, but then she's transformed and she's healed from that. And that's been a big part of her character or what we can see of her or what she's had to experience. I think that's them two coming together down there, even though they're not in the same sign. They're actually Aries and Taurus. They are within a conjunction.
It also, Chiron points to where there is a wound. It's in an intercepted sign, so people don't get to see her wound. It's not out there for people to see. But there's this inability to have be autonomous, to make your own decisions, to be an individual, a unique individual in your own right. And so I don't know if anybody realizes, but Chiron is in Aries right now again.
Yeah.
And that means that the queen has an opportunity to address this wound and maybe start. And we've talked about she's becoming a more personable person. So she is making her own choices. She's showing who she is, even in public with her grandchildren and her great grandchildren, right? That she's a grandmother, that she's someone who nurtures and cares for people. She's not just a public figure. So, which she, before, in my estimation, she's kind of kept that part of her very, very private. And the public didn't see her relationships with the people close to her as much as they are now. So that is a huge placement for her. And I think she's probably had to deal with this wound all her life. And I would guess that she's very close to healing it permanently and forever, be done with it, which is great.
Because yeah, but should we have in a second Chiron return, most people really just go through the first one, which is around 49, but she's coming up to the second one. It's certainly within Aries, so it's within the sign. So she's going through the second lot of healing, the second opportunity to see and reflect, and why she's gone through the pain, what she's learned from the pain, and then an opportunity to heal from that. So that's a good point. And obviously we have Dorothy here, who is very well versed with Chiron. So it's nice to hear your opinion on her, Chiron.
So the only other planet that we did not talk about, which does have a major effect on this chart, is Uranus here in Pisces, and its relationship first with Jupiter up here, and also with which else? What else did it align with? It aligns with a couple of things. It's kind of at a loose quincunx to Neptune up here, and Black Moon Lilith, but it is at a trine to her 10th house cusp, her public persona, her public identity, and Saturn here. And so, that can throw in a few surprises. But when you brought up that she is a forward-thinking individual who thinks about how did you term that when we were talking about Aquarius? She has a unique mind.
Yeah, unique, original thinker. She keeps up with all the new that's coming. She's able to see, I mean, as much as she's traditional, she's able to embrace the future and work for the good of the people, the good of the community, to keep up with the new. I think of like Aquarius is sometimes the new stuff, the people, the visionaries.
Mm-hmm. Uranus rules Aquarius, so does Saturn. So these two planets both rule Aquarius. And they have significant placement in her chart. This is in the house of personal resources, but if you'll notice, we talked about the Sun and Chiron being here. Mercury and Uranus are within what you can, the orb you would consider these. It's a loose conjunction, but it's a conjunction in different signs, right? So her mind is quick, real quick. And Uranus offers her that broader view. So her individual mind is quick. And then she one-ups that thinking with that Uranian energy that can see everything, because it's Pisces, it's everything. Now, Uranus is there giving her information about everything. And Mercury is acting as a funnel to differentiate the information that she needs. Because Uranus could be a lot of information. And it is considered the universal mind, where Mercury is the individual mind. This is the universal or humanitarian mind, the greater mind. So I think we pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, and also, like you were saying, because it is trining that Saturn, her chart ruler, unexpected events that's going to be upon her, which we can see them. We can see how she's, because it's on the reputation, it's on how she's viewed. Sudden events that are shocking, maybe, that hit the Queen and her life, which she's had a few of those come up over the years. Mm-hmm. But, Uranus can certainly be the unexpected.
So, and that's one of the things to bring out about the chart as a whole. Although the things down here are internal or happening privately for the person, the chart itself is a wheel, it's a circle. So it has ramifications in other places. The Queen happens to have true discipline in being able to discipline her emotions and her expression of those emotions with the Venus here in the first house and Mercury here in the second. She checks herself before she speaks out in public. Yet that public persona is affected, and she usually probably handles it in a unique way. She knows her words are going to carry authority. So she uses this alignment here to help her to understand how to speak to the larger group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I will stop saying that one day, I'm sure.
Good.
So where do we want to go from here?
Okay, it's good. So should we pull up maybe 2 of her big transits just to see how they've affected her and show everyone like how we would read a transit. So you know, her when she's 10, when her uncle officially abdicates, and that's on the 10th of December 1936. Obviously it was brewing for a while. It wasn't a huge surprise when it happened on the 10th of December, because you know that was the day where the paperwork went was handed in and signed.
And we're just using a 12 noon time for the transit.
I'm not sure the exact time that day, so I think if we just use 12 and then we'll look at just some of the major aspects, because when I pulled this up, I saw, you know, Saturn is on her Venus, and that I think it's conjunction there. It's been hanging around there for a while, but that is Saturn working on. Yeah, Saturn is there. That's her working on her relationships, and she's 10. She doesn't have a spouse. She doesn't have a partner yet. So this is her family. They're changing. She's having to put the work into them. This can be a tense time if you're married. You know, if you've got Saturn going on your Venus, this can be working at your relationship. So for her, it's like now we're having to put the work in with the family, and the family at that point was going through a little bit of a crisis. You know, her dad and her uncle. That wasn't necessarily a great relationship at the time, with him now having to be king and him having a stutter and not necessarily wanting to go into the limelight. Her mother being very unhappy about the situation, not being happy at her uncle, and you know, her grandmother being really upset that her son was abdicating. So all these family relationships changing, and then like you said, Dorothy, really rightly so, her relationship with her mom's just changed. One day she will be above her mother, which we're not usually. And you know, usually your mother is your parent and she's the elder, but now at some time she's gonna be aware that one day she will be a queen, and at that point her mum will have to bow to her. So I thought that was a really interesting transit to see coming up there on that day.
So since we had pointed out that there was an adjustment required with Venus to the moon up here in Leo, this is the trigger for one of those adjustments are required. And Saturn is a tough trigger. Saturn imposes discipline and boundaries or limits on things. And so at 10 years old, she's got Saturn going over her Venus, which is in alignment that quincunx with this moon. And that means her moon is also being affected in a way that she is the one that has to adjust. Yeah. There's no other way to kind of process this. The other thing that we noticed in this transit was her Venus at the sextile to her MC and Saturn here, but also opposite Pluto in the house of relationships. So Venus is in her first house of identity, and Pluto is here in her house of one-to-one relationships. And so Pluto is also at a trine to Saturn. I just saw something else at this.
Yeah, Pluto.
Pluto and Venus are at angles to Chiron, a square, as a matter of fact, to Chiron, her wound. her ability to be an autonomous individual.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to see on this day that we have here for that he officially advocated.
Yeah.
Now, that would have been going on behind the scenes. They would have all known this was coming before it actually happened. And so there's this, but notice the moon is in her 9th house here. And on that day, it will go across this cusp. So there was this emotional public change out here in her life as well.
Yeah, this doesn't look like a chart where she's happy about becoming queen. I think for me, looking at the transiting Saturn squaring her natal Pluto as well. I mean, if you just think about Saturn Pluto coming together and in a square, that doesn't feel like a nice energy. That's people can think of that as a warlike energy or a transformation or a difficult time.
Saturn is at a trine to her Pluto.
Trines, yes, sorry, yes, it is a trine. They're coming together there. That's not, so a trine is it's flowing, not that it's friction, because a square is friction, the trine is flowing. But that's not necessarily like, it doesn't feel a nice friendly aspect. Like this, not what she's looking at and saying, oh great, I'm going to be queen. It's more, okay, now I've got to think about the Saturn, the work, and what I've got to do, and the Pluto is transforming me, and the Pluto's in my 6th house of my everyday life.
So her identity is transforming, and her day-to-day life is transforming.
Yeah.
There was another aspect. So Jupiter here in the 12th house at 1 is also at a trine to her sun. So trines, energy moves freely back and forth between the two planets. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It means that the energy is moving freely. When it's Jupiter to your sun, that implies an opportunity, right? An expansion. Saturn to Pluto implies you feel as if you're being endowed with responsibility or restrictions, or a limit is being set. So to have both of those things happening at the same time can feel overwhelming. And at 10 years old, I'm sure it was.
Confusing. So if you think about, you just mentioned the Venus opposite the Pluto. Well, usually Venus going over your ascendant, which it would have done within the last week or two before then. That's usually like, oh great, something good's coming to you. So I think within the backdrop of all this, there would have been a recognition of, well, this is fortune. This is something nice, because Venus is all the nice stuff. But it does come with the feeling of being weighed down by responsibility, I think.
Not only would it have come across this 1st house cusp, which is an indication that she's starting a new cycle, but it also would have hit her nodes before it came into the 1st house. And so that kind of engages that dynamic energy between the two nodes and the fatedness of what she's experiencing, or what is she's going to experience as these planets all moved across her 1st house cusp. So a lot of interesting things in this chart. We also have another one, which was when she became queen. So this was when she became an heiress to the throne.
Yep.
And the next one is when she became queen,
which I think is pretty interesting to pull up. If you see, the Saturn is on the Venus here. And a lot of the times if you literally read Rob Hand's book on transits, he says what starts here when Venus hits, when the Saturn hits your Venus, look out for how the relationship is 14 years later when it goes opposite. And it's technically 16 years later, but it's opposite. So it's, Saturn takes 2 years to hover over a sign, 2.5 years.
Oh, so. And we do have 3 a.m. for that time, because her dad passed all the night.
Yeah, her father passed away in his sleep, so we're just using the early hours on the 6th of February 1952 to make a transit chart.
Okay. So this is the transiting chart for when she actually became queen, which is certainly a big deal. And she had just gotten married, as you pointed out earlier, and now she is being put in the position of Queen of United
She
Kingdom.
was newly married with two children. So she had responsibilities. She was at the beginning of her new life as a wife and a mother.
So here in the background, Venus is making a sextile to her natal Venus. So it's not quite yet come out into the public. Mercury, though, has been at a trine. Is that a trine? No, a square to her sun here in the first house, and the sun is here in the first house. So there's a focus on her identity, and it's coming up to a conjunction with all of these other planets in her first house and an opposition to all of these planets. It is at a quincunx to Pluto here, and Jupiter is here in her second house at 11, which is also at a square to Pluto. She has Mars up here in the ninth house, getting ready to come over this Saturn and the 10th house cusp. And she has Pluto on Neptune and these planets here. And also, though, opposite her first house. So if the first house is personal identity and this is your one-to-one relationships, those relationships are transforming. And we talked before about how that would change with her mother, right? With Venus. He's at 20 here. And so, I think they understood well before this took place that she was getting ready to be queen, and those relationships started changing accordingly. So is there any
for a while? Her father, he'd had some surgeries, and he wasn't well. So there was the knowledge of him being sick. And also that Pluto is opposite the Mars and Jupiter. They're
exactly opposite.
Yeah, so that's the transformation of a situation, of a relationship, changing and then putting the action on you. She's propelled to act because of what's happened. I feel like it's making her take action, and she would have had to. Even in the middle of her grief, she had to take a stand, take responsibility, and start her work.
Not only was it about her taking action, but it was also about the expansion of her identity at the same time. And so that would require a big action on her part, and that was accepting or becoming queen, the act of becoming queen, which is different than just I inherited it and not wanting to be involved. She actually took, and it's in the sign of the people, humanity. So it is triggering that move into that public role, although I think she was groomed for it or understood that that was the position she was going to have. But also notice this is happening in those intercepted signs, right? And the way intercepted signs work, you don't necessarily express the energy until it's triggered. Then you become aware of it. So it was triggered when we had the alignment in the previous chart with was it Pluto? It wasn't Pluto, it was Saturn on Venus, and now it's been triggered again here, and Saturn is here at a quincunx. An adjustment is required to Venus. So the first time she had that responsibility laid on her, the next time it's a matter of I don't have any choice. I have to do this. I have to make this adjustment.
This time in this chart, we've got Saturn square to Pluto, and I think that's what I was getting mixed up with the earlier chart, because it was the trine in the first and it's a square. So both times she has that Saturn Pluto aspect at play, which is it really, I think, just shows you again the feelings behind her becoming the monarch, becoming the queen, taking the responsibility. She took it seriously, for definite. But also, I think that it might not have felt as nice as you would imagine when you think about, oh, opportunity to become queen. It just doesn't. Those two planets coming together can often feel difficult, I think. So it wasn't. I mean, I suppose obviously her father passing away, that would have been the grief and the difficult aspect in this situation as well.
She also has Uranus here in her sixth house, conjunct Pallas Athena and Pluto, and
yeah.
Within 10 degrees of the North Node here and Vesta.
Yeah.
So these alignments are an indication that things that were going on in her day-to-day life were kind of sudden for her, felt sudden and surprising.
It was surprising.
Yeah. So, and that is directly opposite Venus in transit over here in the 12th house. And you said her father passed in the night and she wasn't there. So I'm wondering,
she was abroad.
She didn't have any indication that it was about to happen. It was a complete surprise. And her relationship did suddenly change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely some sort of shocking news with that Uranus there, and she wasn't in the country, so it was hard to even track her down back in those days, as well as no mobile phones and so forth.
And we talked before about everything having to pass through Saturn, right? And now we have Saturn at a square to this Uranus, Venus, and Chiron alignment. And so I think, the transiting Saturn is important for her, and her Saturn return is coming up in about 4 years?
Yeah, it would have been
from this date. But this was square this surprise. And so Saturn being square Venus and Uranus adds a layer of challenging energy to the chart. There's responsibility to handle this surprise and this change in her relationships effectively. She's also got Neptune here, which it's close enough to be at a conjunction. So there might have been some confusion. Certainly, a difficult choice of what is appropriate, what is my responsibility right this minute. One thing I do want to point out is this conjunction with Pallas Athena. Is Pallas Athena, the myth is that she thought she couldn't trust her sister, just to make it short, thought she couldn't trust her sister, then found out she was wrong and it was her sister she could trust and not the person that told her she couldn't trust her sister. And so at this point, with this change in sudden change, maybe everything had not been put in place for who was going to be advising her or who she could trust. So she needed to find people she could trust to respond appropriately. And maybe that Saturn is that figuring out who the right people were to help her handle this change.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just reminding myself. Yeah, I've got Rob Hallen's book, and it was Saturn. What does she have? Oh, she's got there's Pluto on Neptune, isn't it? So
yes,
that can be some confusion as well, like not understanding or not Neptune can make you not see things clearly, not knowing maybe what she's going to do next, not knowing
knowing what her real power is.
Yeah,
because it goes about power and control.
Yeah.
Maybe she didn't know if the established order would accept her becoming queen when her dad passed so suddenly. Maybe she thought somebody might a usurper would come in and say she wasn't queen, somebody else would be taking that role as king or something like that. Because in these in royal families there had been a lot of turnover a lot of change. One minute you would think this was a person that was going to inherit, and then the next minute it was something else, someone else. And they didn't inherit, they took it in his. So, even at this point, because she was a woman for one thing, but there could have been this question of, will I really be queen? It would be hard to believe you're going to be queen.
Yeah,
I'm now queen.
Yeah, confused. And then also maybe around her relationships, because it is in the 7th house. So how do I even restructure my relationships now, going forward? Even with her husband, because you can imagine this is 7th house husband. I am now above you, and back then you weren't above your husband. So
Right.
that would have been a big shift in their relationship. But how are you going to?
Yeah, we do have to remember this was 1952.
Yeah, exactly.
So, things were a lot different for women then. Even though you were a queen, things were a lot different then.
Yeah.
And so that brings up a lot of significant issues that she would have had to deal with that maybe somebody in this day and time maybe would.
Yeah. Exactly. It wouldn't be as apparent to our generation as it would have been to her at that time. Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to bring up about these charts?
I think we did a good job of talking about Queen's charts and transits, just trying to show everyone, because I get questions a lot about what does birth chart reading involve, and how does it work. So I think this has given a good, like a tool, a good illustration to show this is what we do, this is how we do it. We look at the birth chart, and then this is a screen right now with 2 charts on. So it's a bi-wheel, it's the Queen on the middle, the events on the outside.
We showed 2 significant charts with we showed transits with significant charts for days that were important in her life.
Yeah.
We don't have the exact time, so we can't narrow it down. But well, it's hard to have the exact time for things like that, and for something this big, just having the correct day is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with things like Saturn.
Beautiful. So I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you, Emmaleen, for doing this with me.
I've really enjoyed doing it, and maybe we'll do some more members of the royal family, because we have their birth times, so we can actually use them as an example to do these readings.
And that would be great, because I know people are interested in that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely some interest there. So if you have any questions, ask us, comment below, and we can answer them for you and explain if there were things that maybe you were confused about, or you didn't understand, or something that you want to know more about, or maybe a part that we didn't talk about that you've noticed. Comment below, and we can answer those questions for you.
And also, if you're interested in a reading with either of us, both of us have websites. Emmalene's is emmaleensastrology.com, and mine is solopchiron.com. So you can go on either website and contact us directly. You could also leave a comment in the comment box saying that you would like to have a talk with us, and we will be happy to do that as well. Both of us post videos regularly. Emmaleen is doing work with another astrologer for the new moons and full moons.
Yep.
I do monthly and weekly YouTube videos, and Emmaleen is on there with me sometimes, which I enjoy.
And when time allows,
so
with children.
We will keep doing interesting videos. We hope to see you next time.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot of fun, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone.